Call the meeting to order. It's 1:32. We're going to start by having Aaron read the land.
Yes, thank you. Kunishtish to the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people. We respectfully acknowledge them as the original inhabitants of Southeast Alaska. Bartlett Regional Hospital is located on the homelands of the Occoquan. We are grateful to provide services in your ancestral homeland and to be a part of this community.
Thank you, Aaron. Roll call. Anita, can you note the roll? The only person that's not here from the board is Dr. Roster.
Better.
And can I get an approval of the agenda, please?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I second.
Thank you. Agenda is approved and seconded. Any discussion? Being no discussion, we'll go right into any public participation. Anybody here from the public like to speak? All right, seeing and hearing no public discussion, I am going to now turn this meeting over to Nate, and he'll start the basic strategy. Thank you, Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Anita, if you could get the presentation up. So before we get started really quick, I just want to make a note. We have put an action item for recommendation for consideration by the board in the packet today. And I just want to state in very general terms, our goal, our objective for today is to get an endorsement and an adoption of the strategic goals. So I just want to state that before we go into the presentation itself. Here's the action cover memo for that. And we'll come back to that later if the board feels that it's appropriate to take action. Also, I'll talk about this in the presentation, but the strategic goals that we would ask for endorsement and adoption have been included in the packet as well. So I wanted to start by thanking the board and the members of the leadership for attending and participating today. Again, the purpose of this special board meeting is to complete the next milestone in our current organizational strategy cycle, which is to discuss, endorse, and adopt a set of organizational strategic goals. The proposed strategic goals were sent out to the board members approximately 2 weeks ago in read-ahead materials and are also included in the meeting packet. This presentation will help us get back up to speed on what we've collectively worked on thus far during this strategic planning cycle. And I hope will instill confidence in the proposed strategic goals that have been developed and proposed for you today, as well as confidence in the process that we followed to get to this point. And then lastly, confidence in the administration's ability to apply, implement, and manage the strategy moving forward. If you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, Anita. So strategy is founded upon our organization's mission, vision, and value. Sorry, I want to go to the second slide real quick.
Here,
I apologize.
that is not working for me.
Yeah, this one right here. But strategy is founded on our organization's mission, vision, and values. And I wanted to take a moment to remind ourselves of these. Just please take a look at it before we move forward. What's not listed on here is our vision statement, which is Bartlett Regional Hospital will be the best community hospital in Alaska. So framing what we're going to be talking about and looking at and discussing today through that lens, I think is an important consideration. Ready for the next slide, please. In order to focus on our objective for today, I don't plan to rehash everything that we've gone through during this entire strategic planning cycle, but I do want to remind the board and the rest of the leadership team here about the things that we've worked on since that June 3rd strategy session that we had. Most of you did participate in that session. And one outcome of that meeting was some really excellent feedback from the larger stakeholder group that we had. If you recall, we had members of CBJ Assembly, CBJ administration, obviously board members, and Bartlett administration. That feedback has since been incorporated into the proposed strategic goals that we're putting before you today. And has since that point has been reviewed again and validated by the executive leadership team. In addition, once the decision was made to bring on Ian as our new interim CEO, we provided him with this information in a hard copy binder and sent it down to Fox Island for his review prior to coming up here. And we also wanted to have that opportunity to incorporate his feedback. Next slide, please. In order to highlight the work that's taken place over the last couple months, I think it's helpful to compare the strategic goals that were presented at the June 3rd session, which is the items on the left, to what is before you today as the proposed strategic goals that have incorporated that feedback. Those are the items on the right. The two most significant pieces of feedback we received from the group that day regarding the content of the goals, at least, were number one, that the strategic goals didn't sufficiently address the need to improve upon existing business lines, service lines, and operations. And then number two, that the strategic goals provided inadequate content and context to convey the intended message to our stakeholders. In other words, that what we were hearing as a part of that was that the goals weren't really clear enough. And again, I'm referring to the way that those goals were presented on the left-hand side of the screen here. I hope you've had a chance to read through the proposed strategic goals and that you can see where that feedback has been incorporated. We've woven in improvement of existing operation into the goals, both implicitly and explicitly here. And then we've also clarified the goal language and included a statement of purpose with each goal to help explain what will happen as a part of being successful in accomplishing that goal. And as a reminder, these are in the packet. And then when we get into the more discussion-oriented stage of today's meeting, we'll keep those goals up on the board as well, on the projector as well. Next slide, please, Anita. Another takeaway from the June 3rd meeting that became apparent was that there was a possible lack of alignment regarding the ownership and responsibility of the organizational strategy, which I think was really important for us to talk about. We may be embarking on a process by which to tackle strategy that's new for us as a group. And so I think that's a natural reaction to what was presented on June 3rd. But I want to instill confidence in the process that we followed so far amongst the entire group here to create an organizational strategic direction. As you can see here, I won't go into great detail, but the concept is that organizational strategic direction for this hospital is a shared responsibility. There are certain elements of that that are more clearly going to fall to the board, some of them that are going to more clearly fall to administration and the staff of the hospital to execute. Sorry, I'm still on this one. I'm just trying to catch up here. With the board's focus more primarily on high-level, big picture, trustee leadership, and the administration's focus on strategy application, execution, and then being held accountable to the board and organizational stakeholders for those pieces. For the current strategic planning cycle, the administration launched our efforts starting from, I want to remind, the board's strategic plan, and worked with staff, community stakeholders, and the board to identify subsequent tangible goals and objectives. As we look to create measurable, achievable, and assignable components of an operational plan, we realized that there was some benefit in creating what I'm considering a handoff document and component of the strategy overall, represented by what we've proposed to you today for the strategic goals. The strategic goals, I just want to take this point real quick, serve, in my mind, three really primary elements. First of all, it demonstrates that there is a shared ownership of our organizational strategic direction. Secondly, that it allows for the appropriate level of communication of strategic direction to a really broad set of stakeholders, thinking public, thinking internally, and thinking to other folks that would be interested in our success. And then lastly, it demonstrates the alignment between the board's strategic plan and what will be the administration's operations plan or operational plan. So we've talked about, just very briefly at least, what those goals are and where they came from and where the contents of those came from. We've talked about the process that we've followed up to this point, but I also want you to have confidence that once we do adopt a set of strategic goals, that the administration is ready to carry those forward. And so I'd ask Aaron to lay out what the next steps will look like once we can get those finalized.
Sure thing. Thanks, Nate. So the last slide, as Nate indicated, there we go, thank you, Leah, is how we connect strategy to operations. And again, it's important that the board has confidence in this critical handoff. As you have set the strategic direction with these goals, then it's our job as a leadership team to execute and put those into action. And so for us, what that looks like is really, I've categorized it into four broad buckets. So the first one is communication. A strategy can't be successful if the people who are impacted don't know about it. So it's important that we take the time to communicate that broadly. As Nate indicated, there's internal stakeholders, there's external stakeholders. We really need to develop as an administration a robust communications plan and what messages are appropriate for the right layer of stakeholder. What gets communicated to the public is more of an informing and will be a very different level than what gets communicated internally to, say, managers, where we're looking for engagement. So that communication plan needs to be built out and executed by the administration. Communications then rolls into the second part of implementation, which is how we put strategy into action, really, and that's where that operational plan will come in. It needs to be flexible. It's a living, breathing resource for the administration, but it will include key metrics for success, our milestones, who's responsible for what programs and activities. And it is, I would say, a prime opportunity for us at this point in the year, as we're getting ready for the budget cycle, for our presentations to the city, to show how our plans and programs are going to align to our higher level strategies. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to move forward here today. A key part of that operational plan is the monitoring, tracking, and reporting. And for the board specifically, I would highlight reporting. This is your area where you will hold us accountable for performance. So having those metrics for success is really critical that we share those with you and work to develop what that presentation and that regularly reporting out will look like, so that you can hold us accountable for performance and celebrate successes when we have them. I don't want to overlook that point. And then lastly, I think Nick and I have talked about this a lot, but strategic planning is a continual cycle. And so each time we start that cycle again, it's an opportunity to evaluate our performance, make changes and improvements to the process. What we're recommending to the board is commitment to a 3-year strategy cycle. So the goals before you today are set for 3 years. But our commitment in turn is to conduct an annual review of our operational plan. It needs to change, it needs to flex, it needs to be ready to address community needs, changes, challenges, and so forth. So that is our proposal before you today. So I think with that, we can turn back to the draft strategic goals. But Mr. President, before we open it up for board discussion, I wanted to actually give Ian, our new CEO, an opportunity if you have any feedback or input you'd like to share with us.
Thank you, Aaron. Ian.
Mr. Chairman. It was very nice of sending me a very large binder on my way up on the Alaska Ferry. And what I found gratifying is that we do have a cycle process. We do have engagement of the board and other members. It's really important for this to be an inclusive process with physicians, members of the board, and staff, so that we get a comprehensive review. Any set of strategic goals provides leadership with an overall framework in which to operate. And what you have to realize is that different hospitals will have different things they need to do to meet seamlessness, right? So the first thing I would say is seamlessness is a continuous service. We have that. Well, we just did that, right? With behavioral health, hospice, home health. So that is one way that you can have seamlessness, but we also probably have to have information flow. So the framework gives us a way of choosing things at an operational level that will meet those goals the best and the fastest within the organization. And so I was really gratified to see all of those strategies, the seamlessness, the development alignment, the infrastructure to meet community needs, clinical growth, obviously, and promote a distinct identity brand, all of which are very consistent with the things that I am bringing to the table in terms of my leadership. And so there's a very good alignment between what I would like to do and the goals. And that was an aha moment on the boat for me when I started thinking, yeah, this is an organization that has those in place. But that is important for us to pass because it gives us the framework in which to operate and then a framework in which to be accountable back to the board for those goals. I'd like to say, great operations is a great strategy. It's a foundational strategy. If we have our ORs working really well, then we can move on to bigger and better strategies than that. But those foundational strategies should never be left behind. And what I was happy to hear when I talked to Dayton, he briefed me, is that the board had an interest in making sure that, we were attending to the basic business of healthcare. Is how do we take care of our patients and how do we serve our clinicians, right? And so I think that the whole rubric about great operations, great strategy. The other thing is that how we talk about strategy is in layers, right? There are very large strategies I think the board has to help us with. And those strategies are kind of packaged in terms of goals. Then there's the next layer down, and the next layer down, and the next layer down in order for us to get those. So it's important that at the board level, we stay with the broad strategies and let operations start dealing with how do we get those tactics, those tasks, those smaller strategies that align us with achieving those at the management level. One of the issues we always have to be concerned about is how do we protect key strategies from our competitors, right? Some of them, and this framework provides us with that level of that. And then it also helps us be adaptable. I don't know if you know, but Darwin never said the survival of the fittest. He said the fittest survive because they're most adaptable. Now, you better check.
I don't know the exact quote, but that's a good paraphrase.
But the focus is on adaptability. So the framework allows us to adapt to circumstances. Healthcare is very challenging. It's changing very quickly. We have, you always have personnel challenges in this environment. You have competitive challenges, and the framework allows us to adapt to the specific environment for us to be successful in this environment. And those same strategies may not be effective in a different environment. Let's just say Bellevue, Washington may not be effective. So those are the sorts of things that I really liked about your approach to this. It was inclusive. It's broad-based enough to allow us to have flexibility and to operate in terms of meeting those strategies and the accountability to make sure that we're actually getting them done in a timely fashion. I don't know if that's enough, but that's kind of my first impressions of what's been done by the board.
Thank you.
That was it for me.
Is it?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Hey,
Mr. President, I would just remind the board again, our goal here today would be to get to a point where we feel comfortable and confident in adopting or endorsing strategic goals. Again, I think this is a natural point where we're taking that shared responsibility with the entire leadership team here at the board and the administration. And I think that puts us in a great position to go out with confidence on how we're going to then start the process, as Aaron had mentioned, of finalizing some internal operational plans, developing communication strategies, and making sure that we can move forward on those. But barring that, I would turn it back over to you, Mr. President, if there's any discussion. The rest of the leadership team here, the administrative leadership team is here to answer any questions that you have.
Perfect. So before I open up for discussion, I actually got to sit down with Aaron and Nate probably a couple of months ago. Looked over the crosswalk here and the way that we did the strategic planning session or strategic workshop. I would probably call it more back in June, and then the way that we were able to crosswalk it, put it together. I know that Nate and Aaron really worked hard on listening to what our thoughts were, what our plans were, what our criticisms were, or what our constructive needs were, also from what the city said to them too. So I do think they all tried to put this all into this document here. I do want to stress that 2 years ago, we worked on a strategic plan and we used Mila as our outside person to help us put together a plan. And that strategic plan itself was the plan of us as a board, that we worked on this document, and then we kind of took the document and turned the document over to administration. Administration had to make that document, which was fairly lengthy, into a working operational document. So I believe that probably in the last year, they really worked to try to do that with this particular document. And this is kind of their final piece of work, I think I'm paraphrasing that. So with that, I really want to turn this over to the board so the board can ask questions and we can see how to proceed here. So let's start with who wants to start. Hal.
Well, okay. So as I looked at this prior to coming, I had a couple of thoughts. One of them was we had these issues that we've talked about for a long time, like affiliation and so forth. And I tried to think, is there a home for most of these topics? And these are very broad goals, and they're by design. But I will say they're clear. There's good use of words, and they're understandable. And so at the very highest level, I don't really have any suggestions for improvement. Again, I found homes for the issues that I was worried about, and it's very clear that you guys have thought about our comments from our last session, and so I have nothing nothing critical to say about it. I like it.
Very good. Thank you, Hal.
I agree. I mean, thanks for listening. Thanks for making it simple. Thanks for making it straightforward. I think these are great, and I fully support them.
Good work, you too.
Mr. Chair, if I could say, strategy involves more than just goals, but that's the first and most important step. And so I do want to endorse that step.
Mm-hmm.
But to really have a strategy, we need to talk about resources that we have. And more importantly, we need to talk about the plan that we're going to take those resources to bring about goals. And then the part of that is objectives and so forth. And that's it may be in some sense harder. So I endorse the goals, but I do want to know about, I do want to discuss the complete strategy at some point.
That's great. Do you have anything specific you want to discuss today?
Not right now, because we're on the topic of goals.
Okay.
So I'm happy with goals. That's all I'm saying about that.
I do have a comment, kind of in response to, I think that, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Hal, that the revision that was made since the June work session provides a lot more clarity than we started out with. You guys have done a great job to take our feedback, and everybody in the room's feedback, and turn it into this. I don't know that, and as Nate said on one of his slides, his that it now is the time for administration to take those and operationalize those. And I don't know that we need to have a full presentation at the board level of the detail. The operational details of the strategic plan, particularly anything that would provide competitive advantage to someone else in the community, or there are a number of reasons not to do that, but I think we could probably go maybe one step down from this in detail from this, but I would not be an advocate to have a full operational plan presented at the board level.
So how I understand this, and Ian, you can help me with this because you've been a strategist for a long time in healthcare. How I understand it is our job as a board is we put together strategies and goals, and we turn that over to the administration, and they put that into operations. Maybe you can speak on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think as the Venn diagram said, there's a handoff between the broad strategic goals and us implementing those goals. And under that would be what I would call tactics. How do we actually make seamless continuity of care, just to use one? How do we actually do that? And which ones would be the most beneficial to doing that? So from that standpoint, I would get together with my leadership team and said, okay, we have this strategic goal of seamlessness. Where are we falling down on that? Can we do an assessment? Where do you think the medical staff would point us in terms of improvements? Are we falling down and getting results back to them on lab results or whatever? I don't know the issues, but that's the level that we get down to and say we have 5 tasks that we're going to do, and we're 50% on one and 100% on others, and we haven't even started one. And show you the kind of results of what we're doing, just in very broad terms, so that you could feel assured that on that one seamlessness, we're actually moving forward. Same thing with, if you went back to those 4, I can give another examples. But thank you, right there. Nope. Right there. No, one more. Right there. Distinct identity and brand. We do have a brand, but how do we get it out into the community? There's so many good stories here. The MVP program is a great story because it's a community need. You give us the broad rubric, we're going to come up with, okay, we're meeting that by, we have the MVP program. We're meeting that because, we are out in the community, making sure that people know what programs we have. We're out promoting physicians that are coming to the community. Those sorts of things are the activities that we have to do to be able to do that. We can report that. There'll be some stuff that's more sensitive to the other, and affiliations tend to be the most sensitive. But again, I think what we have to do is figure out a way to make sure that you're holding us accountable to the things that you've asked us to do. But these goals give us the flexibility to titrate it to the issues in the community.
Thanks.
Posing this to Nate and to Aaron mostly, but also Gail, at the June 4th, and if you talked about this when I had to step out, we can follow up later, but at the June 4th event, I think we had 3, if I remember right, we had 3 assembly members there. Carol, Alicia, and Michelle, I think were the 3 that were in the room. And, there was questions that were kind of, it was left in we're going to work on this some more kind of standpoint when we all left. And I'd just like to get your thoughts about the extent to which we should report back to the assembly. I'm not sure that's the right word in terms of, this before we start operationalizing them. I guess I'm thinking about the assembly buy-in, or at least the communication of these to the assembly before we go to the significant next step. Not that it would hold the next step up, but it just give them the courtesy of, okay, here's, giving them the presentation either through some sort of joint meeting or at an assembly meeting or,
I want to say something just real quickly before that. It would probably, we would probably do something like that, exactly what you're saying in a joint meeting. And I just want to just kind of step on a little bit more on what he's saying is, would the assembly want us to adopt this action item before it went to the assembly? I mean, that's kind of, before we would turn this over to the assembly, I know that we've gone to the assembly and the board hasn't weighed in on something, and the assembly has said the board needs to weigh in on this before you can present this to us. So
I don't know the answer to that question, but if you've been delegated the authority to do these things, I would think that they would want to know what your position is before you do that. But I think they would be very happy with a number of different things. The community needs is what they typically are.
Yeah, I mean, if
I
I
don't
could
know
speak to
what-
that, I would agree with what Ian is saying. The board appointed the assembly appointed each of the board members to assume the responsibility for policy development and implementation at the hospital. And certainly, to implement policy, you have to have some idea of what your overall mission statement and your goals are. And it's certainly within our purview to adopt these. They can always critique them and they could be amended, or there could be an explanation for why something they had hoped to see isn't included and can't fit into any of these goals. And maybe another goal would be it, but I think moving forward to it, and when you get through with this, I have something I'd like to add.
thanks, go ahead, Nate.
Through the chair, I think there are two elements to Max's question. One of them is more procedural, but the other one is when you sat in that room that day, you felt the lack of alignment and ownership inhibiting our ability to carry out activities. And, I think if the board chooses to adopt this, that gives, in my opinion, administration the ability to really start developing that next step, putting the operational plan in use. But I think getting buy-in and having visibility from the assembly to have a better understanding of why is the hospital doing this? Why is the hospital taking this action? Having something like this in my mind will go a long way towards the assembly being able to say, oh, we can see, like you had said, how we can see where that fits in to what you're saying you want to do as an organization. So communicating, I think, is critical. Procedurally, I'll leave that up to you all for how you'd like to do it. But I do think the board can adopt these, and I do think that would give the administration the ability to continue to move forward from this point. We're kind of waiting until this before we really put that operational plan into effect.
Nate, thank you. Brenda.
Thank you. All right, and unfortunately, I was not able to participate in the June session because I was on a long planned vacation at that time. But, so I wasn't involved with pulling these together. And, they all sound good. And they're very high level. What I was sitting here thinking about, someone mentioned affiliations. One thing that this board has been concerned about and interested in for several years now is whether or not Bartlett should affiliate with one or more other medical entities to provide varying levels of support. And we put considerable money into a report on that issue a few years back, which of course is now somewhat outdated, but not totally. And that's still something we need to think about as we are settling out our current administrative structure and making sure that we will survive moving into the future. So I was sitting here looking at the points and trying to figure out, well, now let's see, where would that fit in, or probably attach it to multiple areas, which when you have high level overall goals, that happens. So then we need to fairly quickly, I know it's not going to happen today, but be able to attach some of the more task-oriented, down-to-earth items that we want to accomplish to these. And I would agree with which, you. That we don't want to have an operational plan out before this body and have it, laid out, sort of like laying out everything you do. You need to, but we need tracking items, and specifically on that one. How are we going to know if we're moving towards some of these items that bring these fairy goals into tangible reality? So that needs to happen fairly quickly. And I'm very particularly interested in affiliations, because I think we need to come to some decisions on that. It affects on how we hire the C-suite. It affects how we get medical consultations and all sorts of things, even supplies and technical assistance. So I know that won't be answered here, but I think that step needs to happen really fast. So
I think Hal had his hand up before.
I wanted to say something very similar, and so I don't want to be duplicative, but maybe I will, because redundancy is helpful to really make the point. As I was sitting here thinking about where's a home for all these things that I'm concerned about, I want to be sure that it's on somebody else's list. When we went through this before, at that time I was pretty new on the board, but I heard all this complaining about Meditech, and we had, over and over and over about Meditech. And then considerable resources were put into improving Meditech, but we never really have had a metric that shows us whether that was successful or not. And so now I've got a bunch of other issues this time around that I'm concerned about, specific issues that I can imagine there's a home in there, but I don't know that you were thinking the same thing.
Right.
And even if you are, I can imagine here it'll be in 3 years and we won't know if we've made progress. Was I the only one who really surprised that Meditech got such low ratings? Or at least that's what I read into the physician engagement survey, that they're still unhappy. So anyway, I think to close the loop and really make this a strategy, we do need at some point some assurance that these issues we've been talking about have a home under one of the strategic goals.
I don't disagree with you. I guess what I was trying to say, not very well earlier, is that we need to trust administration to put the details together without our interference at the detail level. That the high level, let's just say Meditech and affiliations, I agree, we need to have reporting back, and we need to have metrics with regard to it and some high level steps. But the level of detail, I have found that in a couple of instances, we've gotten so far into the weeds and spent a lot of time discussing what we should have trust in our administration to implement successfully.
Mr. Sugar, yes. Can I just say, I completely agree with that.
Ian, did you have something? No, I was just listening.
Okay, I want to say too that I very much want to make sure we aren't micromanaging, and that's not what I'm suggesting at all. I don't want to do it. I just want to make sure these things get done. And I think there might be a little laundry list of things like the things that we've talked about here that need to kind of be visible somewhere, and make sure that somehow they're getting attached to these goals and a plan is developed and so forth that we don't interfere with, but we see and we get reports back on, progress reports, kind of tracking on certain items, so that we know things are moving forward or are being dropped as not good things to pursue anymore. That's all.
Yeah.
So just getting back to Max's comment that he asked me to speak on earlier, I agree that it is under the board's duties to set this strategic plan for the hospital, but I do agree that there should be under the joint council a discussion with CBJ, because I think there is still misalignment that we noticed in June, that under the direction of the CBJ ordinances, we are considered a public health division of CBJ, and that misalignment really needs still to be looked at. And what is our mission for CBJ as a hospital and organization? Because our goal and where we're looking at on our strategic goal is very much out of alignment of just a public health entity as part of CBJ. So that misalignment really needs to be talked about between the board and CBJ leadership of what is the goal for this hospital, because these are very forward thinking. So that is something that the board and CBJ leadership and whoever our new CEO and Ian moving forward need to look at and move us forward, because if we're going to adopt and go in this direction, we need to work forward and move in this direction. And that will really direct us if the board is going to work under alignments or strategic partnerships in the future. So we need to really be thinking about that as we're moving forward.
So, sorry, Lisa, go ahead, Lisa. You're on mute, Lisa.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got it. So to Gail's point, I remember sitting at my table in June, and I don't exactly remember who said it, or and I'm just paraphrasing now, but that basically the assembly is looking for some forward thinking from the board so that we know what our goals are when we come to them, that, you know, they have a really big job, and that, so for us to come to them, wanting them to help solve all of our problems is not really what they're wanting. It's not that we don't consult with them, but I think they're looking for us to have a focus and a direction for what we want to accomplish as a board and as a hospital. And if anybody doesn't agree with me or they didn't get that same impression, please correct me, but that was the impression that I got. So I think it's good for us to talk with them and engage with them, but I also think that we need to have an idea of what our direction is and what we want. And then as far as the goals themselves, I think they're wonderful. I like how they're broad. That allows our leadership to go, because we don't have a crystal ball. I mean, this strategic plan is for the next several years. I mean, who knows what's going to happen a year from now? And so it allows some adjustment. It allows them to flex and to and basically adjust to what changes are coming. So for that, I really like the strategic plan, and I appreciate the work that was done on it.
Thank you, Lisa. I just want to add one more thing to her. I absolutely remember the assembly members telling them that they want us to come to them with what our plans and goals are going forward. They don't want us to come to them to help us solve any of our questions. They want us to bring it to them. So that was very well put, Lisa, and I think it was very well told us in that room as well. So this document, in my eyes, seeing it for a couple of months ago and kind of seeing it even develop a little bit more, is a living, breathing document that has lots of flexibility and able to change and move forward, to be revisited every cycle. So I do really like the way that this came out of that session. So I appreciate it. Anybody else have anything, Dr. Jones?
Again, just what I said, I think it's really good. And, when we talk about, this is why I want to give administration flexibility. For one example, like the Meditech thing, So we look at seamless continuity of care. Meditech all across the whole board is going to improve seamless continuity of care. But when we look at this, well, we may have some more, we're going to have more employers grumbling or whatever. So that I think the flexibility that each one of these, any operational decision we make is going to impact, or like when we do affiliations, are going to impact one or more of these strategic goals. And administration's job is to kind of say, weigh these, the pros and cons of each decision they make to do what's best for the organization. So I think that's how it's going to work. And, I think if we pick one little thing, we may be missing that little piece of weed. We may be missing, well, what's the bigger picture of that?
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Shelley, did you want to add something?
No, I agree with what people are saying. Is I like what senior leadership did to make the strategic plan more, for me, more readable. And I think anybody who looked at it would be able to understand it easily. And I like that it has that flexibility in it. And I also agree that I think we make our decisions and then we do share that with CBJ.
Thank you, Shelley. All right, any other comments from any board members or any staff? Deb?
I would only like to say, under the assumption that we approve this as is, and it sounds like we're going to, and with all the comments that this is living, breathing, dynamic, flexible, that we commit to annually in the November or December meeting, a review of where we stand, at a minimum, a review of where we stand, and a look at these, at what's written here to see if there's any modification needed in that year. Otherwise, it can get away from us. And a year and a half or 2 years goes by.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to move that we adopt these as our 2024 strategic goals.
All right, do you want to use their motion there?
It's at the bottom. Yes,
it's pretty easy.
yes, okay, I would like to.
Pretty much what Hal said.
I didn't be
It's just verbatim. I don't think he needs to repeat it.
Yeah, I think you did.
Except for the 24 to 27.
With that slight modification. That'd be my. Forgot the 27.
I second that.
Second, perfect memory. Okay.
Lindy seconded.
Sorry, let me see. Second, okay, so it's been moved, seconded. Do we have any more discussion on this? All right, seeing no discussion, we have adopted the strategic goals set forth to us. With that, we are done with this meeting. We are adjourned.
I know. Good job, you guys. You guys did a good job.
I know.
That was a, so that was.